1,000 years in the future, everyone you know lives deep underground in a single interconnected city that spans all the way across the continental United States. The surface level was long ago abandoned after nuclear winter, overwhelming smog, and marauding gangs of cannibals. On your 19th birthday, thereby making this a YA dystopia, you find an open elevator shaft that goes all the way up to level 000, the surface level. You've never been to the surface, but you decide to give it a shot, risking instant death by radiation by opening the door to the surface after climbing up 214 stories with nothing more than a rope and grappling hook. As you get to the top, you look down to see love interest one, a goth underworlder like yourself named Soot, who, despite being terrified of heights, followed you all the way up silently because he is a silent smolder-er, on the basis that, like you, he is an orphan who grew up in the cage, which is needlessly capitalized throughout the story, and was a sort of wrestling slave school / orphanage to prepare people for gladiatorial combat. When Soot helps you pry open the door to the surface, his pectoral muscles rippling because of his cage training, you realize it's nothing like you were told. It's a paradise. It's not overcrowded. The air is clean. There's a river that love interest two, a jock-y, beautiful Richard, so named because he is rich, and you see the sun. It turns out that President Trump the 14th is keeping everyone in the Underworld down there to make room for the elite Surfaceworlders, and you, as an Underworlder and dissident, don't belong. But Richard, now made suddenly aware of the plight of the Underworld, hides you and Soot away in the attic of his mansion where you plot revolution. How will you seek the fall of President Trump the 14th and the return of your people to the surface world? Okay, so this is difficult. Okay, so we've only done one of these episodes before this, right? And the previous episode was a little bit different because it was just about strategy, right? Because the people involved on every side were like basically doing the things that like make sense for them to do. But this is going to be different, okay? Because it's a YA dystopia, okay? And as a YA dystopia, people have to be stupid. It's crucial. It is a necessary component of the storytelling that they need to be stupid, okay? So the first question is, in what sense are you stupid? Question mark. Okay, so obviously you're horny because it's a YA dystopia. And you care way too much about the individuals, Soot and Richard, considering the broader class struggle as, yes, vaguely important, but significantly less important than the matter of Soot's pectoral muscles, etc. Okay, so that's the first sense in which you're stupid. Also, you're probably not all that concerned by the actual manner in which society will function after President Trump the 14th is taken out of power. Also, you probably care intensely for the people of the cage to the degree that you don't necessarily care all that much about all the other Underworlders who, though not literally orphan slave gladiators such as yourself, are still forcibly kept underground by the dictator, President Trump the 14th, period. Parentheses, and all his predecessors. Yes. I can spell predecessors, right? I don't actually care that much, but I'm going to fix it. I fixed it. Okay, cool. So that's the sense in which you're stupid. In what sense are you stupid? Next, what are Soot's goals? I think Soot is a more committed revolutionary than you are. He's presumably going to have a really intense hatred for all Surfaceworlders, which will specifically manifest in his hatred for Richard. Parentheses, they'll also have a little bit of unresolved and plausibly deniable gay sexual tension that we never quite address. That's important for a YA dystopia. So presumably he's going to have really intense hatred for the Surfaceworlders. He's going to have a lot of connections in the mob of the Underworld because he's been working in the gangs down there, partially for his own personal reasons. He likes power, but also to protect you, who he sees as his girlfriend / best friend, even though you probably low-key don't deserve him. Don't deserve him because you're comparatively boring as a human being. Parentheses, self-insert, for random readers. Okay, so that's Soot's goals. Richard thinks you're hot and all dat. Doesn't particularly... has daddy issues, presumably. He has to have daddy issues. Has daddy issues. Doesn't like people in positions of power. Arguably vaguely left-coded. To a degree that's less true of Soot, who simply is anti-Trump the 14th and pro-Soot / you getting together. Okay, so that's in terms of Soot. Okay, so now we have our three main characters. In what sense are you stupid / what are your goals? Your goals. What are Soot's goals? Richard's goals. So he thinks you're hot. He has daddy issues. That's a goal of his. He doesn't like people to be in positions of power, just in general. He's probably very scared of the Underworld, and doesn't want to go down there. He's almost certainly grown up hearing horrible stuff about what happens down there. Some of it true, much of it lies. I'm going to scooch this down so you can see me better because I'm beautiful. Okay, much of it lies. Okay, good. Oh, this should be a separate thingy boober. Okay, so I think he's a more committed revolutionary than you are. What else about Soot? He's very willing to kill people. More so than you and Richard. Yeah. Pacifist. Refuses to kill people. Like ever. Even when it makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense to kill them. Wouldn't even kill Trump the 14th. Even though he low-key / high-key deserves it. I want to clarify. This is true of Trump the 14th. Okay, I would definitely never say this about anyone who's currently alive. This is strictly just fiction. You know, I was gonna say fan fiction, but it's not fan fiction because it's an original story, so it's not fan fiction. Anyway, okay. Obviously, you're horny because it's a YA dystopia. You care way too much about the individuals Soot and Richard. You probably also, considering the broader. No, continue. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Considering the broader class struggle, and yes, vaguely important, but significantly more important is the matter of Soot's pectoral muscles, etc. You're also concerned about the cage, capitalized. It has to be capitalized. And its inhabitants, particularly your little sister. You've got to have a little sister. It's necessary. She can't be named Prim, but she's Prim, but she can't be named Prim. Her name is it can't be Prim. It has to be like Prim, but it can't be Prim. What's a name that's like Prim that isn't Prim? Pout. Yeah, her name is Pout. Okay. Cool. Particularly little sister, her name is Pout. Okay, what are Pout's goals? Is Pout going to be main character? Pout's goals. Pout is a coward. Pout doesn't want to die. To die, she lives in the cage, and so that's a very high probability that'll happen. Eventually. She's currently still 14, so that by the second book, when she's like 16, she can be a proper main character. But right now, she's still young enough that she can be the wah-wah I'm an idiot child character. Having her be 14 is a very convenient age for her to be right now. And so that's her age. Period. Convenient. Why can't I spell words? Here's a question. Okay, do you care? Drop in the chat. Okay, not the chat. Drop in the words that you say below the thingy. Okay, the comments. Okay, drop in the comment section. Do you actually care if there are misspells? Do I actually have to change and fix the misspells, or can there just be misspells? I don't know the answer to that. You have to answer that for me. Okay, it's up to you. Okay, Pout doesn't want to die. Pout is a coward. Pout cares a lot about her dog. Floof. Her dog's name is Floof. Floof is a Burmese mountain dog. He's huge. He's absolutely a monster of a dog. And he's a fighting dog, obviously. Obviously, he lives in the cage. but she's grown very attached to him, and she's constantly playing with him, and he's super nice to her, and also a crazy dog who can literally eat people, and has done so multiple times in a fight before this story even begins / in flashbacks. Okay, so that's who Pout is. So these are our 4 main characters, right? Now I need to think about who are our enemies. Okay, so obviously enemies. Okay, President Trump the 14th is an enemy. Okay, there's going to be leadership of the cage. The cage. So there's Surfaceworld enemies. So there's President Trump the 14th. There's leadership of the cage enemies. And then there's here's the question. Is the cage, how important is the cage, capitalize, is the cage to the leadership chain within Underworld politics? Okay, so obviously there's like ballpark 10 billion people who live below the surface, and ballpark 100 million who live above. The cage itself has around, let's say 10,000. That's too many. Let's say 1,000. That's too many. Let's say 500. Around 500 children in it, and about in training (parentheses) in training, and about 300 adults in the gladiatorial combat. Gladiatorial combat. I don't know how to. Why can't I spell today? People, I was so much better at spelling the last time we did this. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. And about 300 adults in the gladiatorial combat system. Okay. So it's going to have... it's obviously some televised across the Underworld. It's obviously illegal, quote unquote, but also the Underworld government is fully aware of its existence. Here's a question. Is it televised upstairs? Is it televised up in the surface world? I think yes, but they think it's yes, but they think that it's fake, or at the very least are told, perhaps unconvincingly, that it's fake, giving everyone some degree of plausible deniability. I also think 10 billion people is too many. I want to have 1 billion people who believe who live in the Underworld. I think it's important to just keep on calling it the Underworld and the Surface World and the Cage, and all of those things need to be capitalized for no reason. Given everyone some degree of plausible deniability, that feels right. Yes, because I want to have 1 billion and 100 billion, because then it's like, then you have 9% ballpark of the population live above ground, and that would suggest that they have like some fleeting amount of ability to protect themselves, particularly given they have all of the military might. Whereas if it's 10 billion to 100 million, that gives you 100% more, 100 times as many people, which is too many times as many people. I think 10x is good, but 100x is not good. Okay, cool. Is it televised up in the surface world? Yes, but they think that it's fake, or at the very least are told, perhaps unconvincingly, that it's fake, giving everyone some degree of plausible deniability. Therefore, you're famous. Therefore, you and Soot are somewhat famous. You're not like the most famous. Others, including Floof, who live in the cage, are significantly more famous. But you would probably get recognized if you just wandered around, either in the surface world or in the underworld. Okay. So that's the first question. Okay. So it's televised across the world. Is it a respected thing to be of the cage? Parentheses, presuming that you have a winning record. In the Underworld, I think no. There's a lot of people who join short term without training, who are there as criminals and as people who owe a debt to the mob. But people like you, who've been trained since birth, those slaves, if you're able to escape, if you're able to earn your freedom, not escape, earn your freedom, you can often become a respected member of society, / a leader in gang politics. That feels right? Because like you're a scary guy if you're able to survive the cage, right? That feels right. Okay. But currently though, you're still relatively novice, and so though well trained, you're not at all respected compared to others in the cage. Okay, so here let's go back to who the enemies are. Leadership of the cage enemies. Are they previously enslaved members of the cage, or did they start the cage, or are they owners of the cage, etc.? I think they're going to be a mix. You're going to have the top guys, parentheses, they're all going to be men because it is a YA dystopia, except for one who is going to be a woman and evil because it is a YA dystopia. That's an interesting question. President Trump the 14th, is that a woman? 14th. Why is it doing the schmoopity boopity? I don't want to do the schmoopity boppity. is that a woman? Leadership of the cage. Okay, cool. Are they previously members, enslaved members of the cage? I think yes. Some of them are. It's gonna be a mix. Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna have the top gal. She is a woman. Okay. So she's got to be. She's the daughter of the previous leader. She's super scary. She's got a massive scar that we don't explain. That looks vaguely Zuko-coded. Zuko-coded. She's the... what else? She's super evil and likes to see people bleed and experience terrible experiences, etc. Presumably, she works in cahoots somehow with President Trump, the 14th. And she's also very, very connected with the mob of the Underworld. Okay, that's the top gal. Then there's the fighting coach. We have to name these people, I know. So her name's going to be Cordelia. Cordelia? Is that going to work? She has to have a last name. Cordelia Minister. Cordelia Minister. Madam Minister. That feels right. Madam? Is it Madam or is it Miss? Mrs. Minister? What's the most sinister version of Minister? Madam Minister. The reason she's named, the reason for her name being Minister is because she's also a cult leader. She's got like a bunch of sycophants who consider the cage to be a holy place and your sacrifice to be like a slaughtered lamb or something. And so therefore she's constantly talking about, why can't I spell sycophants? How do you spell sycophants? I don't know that. In my defense, okay, sycophants is a ridiculous word. It shouldn't even be a thing. Okay, it is a word, but it shouldn't even be a word. Okay, she's got a bunch of of sycophants who consider the cage to be a holy place and your sacrifice to be like a slaughter of lamb or something. Therefore, she's constantly talking about your purported innocence. And her protection of the children of the cage. I think that should be capitalized. Children of the cage. Children of the cage. Ooh, is that a good title for the whole story? Yeah, I think it is. Name of the story. Hold up. Ay. Name in bold. Command bold. Children of the cage. There should be insert secondary component of the title. Component of the title. We'll think about it. Beautiful. Children of the Cage. That's a good name. That's a very good name. We're very talented. Okay. Enemies. Surface world enemies. No, we're not talking about surface world enemies. We're talking still about leadership of the enemy of the cage. Okay, so this is Cordelia Minister, Madam Minister. Therefore, she's constantly talking about your purported innocence and her protection of the children of the cage. There's the fighting coach. That's going to be a guy. It has to be a guy. And his name is going to have to be like Brad something. Brad Buttonsworth. Yeah. Also, a lot of these are going to have like the same first letter of the first name and the same first letter of the second word. So I think his name's going to be Brad Buttonsworth. Okay. So Brad Buttonsworth, he's actually got no business being the fighting coach. He's simply the son of someone in leadership of the Underworld mob. So that means that we're gonna have to figure out who his father is. Okay, so that's Brad Buttonsworth. He's kind of a nice guy. He's low key a nice guy, but he's also tasked with this impossible set of situations because he's got to train all these kids well enough they can win their fights against the random people thrown up against them, parentheses, enemies of the mob, but also he knows that every single fight inevitably will result in one person or the other getting killed. Oh, we should split. He's the fighting coach. He's only the fighting coach for the children of the cage, not for the because there's gonna be two separate groups of people who fight in the cage. There's gonna be the children of the cage, and there's gonna be the ones who like didn't grow up in the cage, right? So those are separate groups, and the ones who didn't grow up in the cage, those are the ones who become cage fighters because of the fact that they've like fucked up in relationship to the dystopian government. I have to sneeze. I sneezed while saying I have to sneeze. I had to sneeze really badly. Excuse me for my sneeze. Okay, so he's only the fighting coach for the children of the cage, not for the it's gonna be like, it's not refugees, it's not tourists of the cage, it's gonna be immigrants of the cage. But what's another word for immigrant? Synonyms for immigrant. What is a synonym? What is a synonym? Synonym. I don't want translator. Go away. I don't want translator. I want synonyms. Go away. My computer's being slow and I don't like it. Synonyms for immigrant. Settler of the cage, migrant of the cage, refugee of the cage. Settler seems the best of that. Settler, invader of the cage, invaders of the cage. We're going to stick with invaders for now, but I don't think it's a great word for it, but we're going to have to think about it. We'll come back to it, I'm sure. So he's only responsible for the fighting coach of the children of the cage, not for the invaders of the cage. Therefore, we have another one who's the fighting coach for the children of the cage, Brad Buttonsworth. And then there's the fighting coach for the invaders of the cage. And that's going to be a scarier sounding name. It's going to be like Carl Klaus or something. No, that doesn't work. That's not scary. We need something genuinely horrifying. Okay, it's going to be like fire. Fire. It has to start with an F now. And it can't be a curse word. Fire fountain. No, that's not going to work. Fire machine. Yeah, he's just going to be called Fire Machine. That feels reasonable for a YA dystopia. The fighting coach of the invaders of the cage, Fire Machine. He's a scary dude. And most of his guys don't survive their first fight, but those that do by definition, have to have killed one of the children of the cage. And that means that Fire Machine has an intense chip on his shoulder, because he himself was an invader of the cage, not a child of the cage, which means that he had to take out a lot of the friends of the people who are now adult children of the cage, and are his peers, including in leadership. So he's a scary dude, and people don't like him. So he's deeply unpopular among the permanent, I'm going to put that in quotations, permanent residents of the cage. Parentheses, obviously, no one's truly permanent. No one is truly permanent until they stop fighting. And most don't ever accomplish that, albeit some do eventually get to a point where they're only fighting against people who they know they can beat, like Floyd Mayweather. Against the Paul brothers, etc. Okay. So obviously no one is truly permanent. And then note, that means that Fire Machine, even once he became a respected member of the cage, had to fight against real opponents the entire time until he won his freedom, because he only ever fought children of the cage, not against invaders of the cage. Okay, so that's like his sort of horror story prior to being. Ooh, I like this. He's gonna be like the Snape. Yeah, prior to being an invader of the cage, he was forced to become one because he had been a freedom fighter / arguably a terrorist against the not Surfaceworld, against the Underworld. I don't think he necessarily knows, against the Underworld mob. He tried to break off a component of the territory to become its own independent, I'm going to put this in quotations, country under his leadership. So he's, on the one hand, a badass and a really strong leader. On the other, he's constantly trying to protect his new people by killing your friends. And he's also kind of kept secret a little bit on the television side of things, because even though he's extremely useful as a tutor / trainer he can't be seen as being such, because otherwise he'd become this sort of de facto representative of the revolutionary sentiment of the underworld. That's why he's still, despite being much more talented than as a trainer than is what was his name? It was the other guy, Brad Buttons, or Brad Button, then is Brad Buttonsworth. He can't ever become the trainer of the children of the cage, because that's a position that requires being constantly on TV. Brad's in the position as a stepping stone towards a broader political career, or at the very least, that's what his father wants him to use the position as. Okay, I like that. So prior to it, he started this revolutionary thing. It was a failed revolution. Okay, because of his revolutionary history, he's got a lot of friends outside of the cage. He can't leave the cage, and no one else can leave the cage really either. But he's still seen by much of the membership of the revolution as being they're at the very least honorary leader, in a sense. I should clarify. This is a very specific facet of the revolution. It's not necessarily great people that we're talking about. It's just the ones who have the most realistic chance within the underworld, excluding Surfaceworld tensions and political pressure to change anything below. Okay, so that's that component. So because of that fact, therefore, whenever their people are captured, he often will use their televised fights, generally televised deaths, / executions, as a way of getting messages out to the revolutionaries beyond the cage, and people, when they come in, will share information on what's going on outside the cage with him. I like this. I like this guy. He's an interesting, because he's not quite strictly simply like an enemy, because the truth is that, like, I'm sure you hate him, but he's also like, he's in this position because people want within the leadership for everyone in the public to hate him, but also he's in this position, and this position is like helping him learn how to train militarily, and he's getting to the position where he's getting a lot of like benefits from this position as well, and he's also constantly able to sort of low-key somewhat kind of be on television, so it's like this very strange sort of position for him to be in. I like this a lot. Okay, so that's fire machine. Okay. How important is the cage to the leadership within the Underworld's politics? Obviously, there's like ballpark. So it's their, this is their public execution. This is their form of public execution. Whenever someone needs to die, someone important needs to die, they become what was it? Not settlers of the cage. It's invaders of the cage. They become invaders of the cage. Actually, no, because invaders of the cage sounds too cool. I think settlers of the cage makes them definitionally like bad. I think settlers of the cage is better than we're gonna call them settlers of the cage. Do I really have to go back and fix all of that? I don't think I do, but I'm gonna fix it here, and then we'll just call it good enough. Prior to being a settler of the cage, settler, whatever. So they're settlers of the cage. That feels right. Okay. What was I saying? How important is it? Yes. This is their form of public execution. Whenever someone important needs to die, they become settlers of the cage. This is incredibly. This means that the quality of the children of the cage as fighters is crucial in that every time one of you loses a fight, it's seen as a form of tacit respect and evidence of success of successful resistance against the regime / leading mob of the Underworld. That feels right. But it's also, there's also lots of betting happening on the fights. And there's a degree to which sometimes the settlers of the cage should win. Because if they don't win ever, then there's this then it feels rigged, which isn't good. Obviously there's sometimes specific fights are rigged, in various ways. Blunt weapons, drugs, etc. Drugged fighters, etc. But that feels like generally you want to win. So their goal, the leadership's goal, is to see children of the cage win ballpark 70% of fights, but not all of them. They don't want that either. Okay, that feels reasonable. Okay, so this is their form of public execution. Is it respected to be of the cage, presuming that you have a winning record and presuming that you are a child of the cage? That you are a child of the cage rather than a member, rather than a settler of the cage. In the Underworld, I think no. There's a lot of people who join short term without training, who are there as criminals, join settlers of the cage. But people like you have been trained since birth. Those slaves, if you're able to earn your freedom, you can often become a respected member of society, a leader in gang politics. This is often the trajectory, but only around half of the children of the cage, born as children of the cage, actually end up alive long enough to gain their freedom. Actually, it's going to be much less than half, only around a tenth. The rest die either in fights or in training. Yeah. That feels right. Okay. You're still relatively a novice, and though well-trained, you're not at all respected compared to others in the cage. It's obviously illegal, but also the Underworld government is fully aware of its existence, and the mob and the government are, though technically separate, deeply in line. Okay. That's good. Cool. I feel like we basically understand the cage. Now let's talk about the surface world. Okay. In terms of the surface world, how does their world work? Okay. Who is Richard? Okay, so we've got our President Trump. Okay. This should be schmoopity boopity. I'm sorry. Schmoopity bop, schmoopity bop, schmoopity boopity boop, boopity bop. Cool. This is good. Okay. So we've got in our surface world, we've got President Trump, the 14th. Is that a woman? I think no. The main enemy needs to be a man. It is necessary. Period. Okay. So that's President Trump. He is presumably not self-made at all. Like IRL Trump. ... There should be a third dot. ... He's presumably lived in a palace his entire life, ready to become the president / dictator, to assume office from his father. He's been in power for like 20 years. It's been a long time. And he's relatively old. He's got he's constantly surrounded at all times by guards. Yeah. So he's like all of those like trappings of Kim Jong-un, North Korea, whatever. But also there's got to be some like weird shit about him. What's the weird shit about President Trump the 14th? Obviously he is a really big fan of the cage. And so sometimes he'll take certain winners from the underworld and make them fight in his own personal, not televised battle cage in the throne room itself, strictly in front of his court and no one else. That feels like a thing that eventually you're going to have to compete against Soot or against your sister, remind me her sister's name. What was her sister's name? Your sister's name. It's probably just going to be against Soot. It's going to be this book, right? And Pout. Your sister's, or against Pout. Against Soot or against Pout. Yeah. Pout is a very important member of this story. We're gonna have to figure out a way to make Pout become more important than she is currently, because currently Pout is completely irrelevant. But we're gonna make her relevant. By book 2, she's gonna be relevant. So we have to figure out a way, even though she's not important in this story, to make her like on track to become important by the end of the story, so that eventually she can become important. Because I think eventually she's gonna be the one to take down President Trump or something. Okay, it's gonna be really important. She's gonna be very valuable. Okay. So he's a really big fan of the cage, and so sometimes he'll take certain winners to the Underworld, make them fight his personal battle cage. That feels like something you'll eventually have to do, compete against Soot or against Pout. Even though that's against the rules. That's against the rules, because obviously you're not supposed to have to fight against children of the cage as a child of the cage yourself, period. Okay, that's good. So he's a really big fan of the cage. He's a really big fan of Floof specifically. That dog needs to become a relevant component of the story. Specifically the protection of that dog from becoming more of a fighting dog than he already is. Ooh. Therefore, at the beginning of the story, this is important, he needs to break a leg. And you need to protect him. No, he doesn't need to break a leg. He needs to get a really bad bite that becomes somewhat infected. And you need to protect him. So you carry him. No, so you can't carry him because you're not can't carry him because you're not strong enough. You're not strong enough. So Soot carries Floof with you all the way up to the surface world because you're desperate to protect Floof. Okay? The whole story begins because everyone wants to save or kill Floof. Okay? Floof is a crucial member of the story. A crucial member of the story. We stan Floof. Okay? He is the goodest of dogs. Okay. We stan Floof. Okay, so that's who Floof is. He's a really big fan of Floof specifically and wants Floof as his own personal guard dog. Yes. You don't realize that President Trump wants Floof as a guard dog / pet rather than as a continued member of the cage to continue constant fighting. The whole story starts as a misunderstanding because someone in leadership told you that Floof was going to be taken away from the cage, and you thought that meant he was going to be put down. To be put down when really it meant he was going to be nursed back to health and made into a guard dog at the palace, which would almost certainly make him much safer than living in the cage, albeit it would break Pout's lil heart, period. We stand Pout. We must protect Pout, okay? It's necessary to protect Pout. Okay, cool. So that's Floof. And that's the president, President Trump the 14th. Who else are people who matter up top? Richard's father is going to be Senator Kraus. Yeah, Kraus. Kraus Strauss. His name is going to be Kraus Strauss. So Richard's name is Richard Strauss, and his father's name is Kraus Strauss. Senator Kraus Strauss. Okay, cool. The senator, he's a senator of the, quote, U.S. government, second U.S. government. It's important not to call it the actual U.S. government. There needs to be clarity that it's a different government than the U.S. government, even though obviously we're doing it as a condemnation of the United States government, because obviously this whole thing is secretly about how, it's all about the Vietnam War, right? Actually, the whole thing is about the Vietnam War, obviously. Just like every single Star Wars is actually about the Vietnam War, and this is also about the Vietnam War. Don't think about it too hard. What's relevant is that this is the Vietnam War, okay? And so as a person who is consuming this story, okay, you need to know that it's about the Vietnam War. Is it? Of course not. But is it? Yes. Okay? That's important. Okay. He's a senator of the second U.S. government. Senator is capitalized. He's basically a lackey for the president. But ultimately, he wants to take power for himself, which means which means overthrowing the Trump administration /line, and building up a Strauss line of presidents. That's his goal. Okay, so Richard needs to become. Therefore, Richard needs to be a really strong guy who has the right sensibilities and training such that eventually he can take over for his father, Kraus Strauss. Yes. Okay. So that's his father. Basically a lackey for the president currently. Okay. His political agenda, other than personal leadership, is to manage to increase the productive capacity of the surface world such that they become less dependent on underworld production, so that eventually they can cut off the power supply to the underworld, shutting it down completely, and destroying the underworld to such a degree through crashed economy that they'll be able, Surfaceworlders, this world military, to sweep through cull the population a great deal, and take over the entire both military apparatus and much of the shallower floors for their own use. The surface world is better than the underworld to live in, for sure. But right now, there's this concern as the surface world is in constant war against the other two great powers. Parentheses, yes, we're 100% ripping off 1984 right here. 100%. There's going to be a forever war with changing sides of it between the three great world powers. Okay, so that's the surface world, right? So therefore, but if the Surfaceworlders of the American of the American continents, all of which fall under President Trump right now, the 14th right now, were to be able to go underground, they could afford nuclear war again. And then, ultimately, the Strauss family could become dictators not just of the Americas, but of the entire global population, which is Senator Krauss Strauss's ultimate goal. Okay. At the beginning of the story, Senator Krauss Strauss who is a somewhat absent father because he's primarily focused on grabbing power more than the goings on of his son. The senator won't realize there's two children hiding in his attic. But by the midpoint of the story, he should find out. That feels right. Period. Glorious, 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 glorious. So that's Krauss Strauss. Okay. So in terms of the leadership, we don't want to make this too complicated because it is a YA dystopia, and so therefore YA dystopias are very simplistic, okay? This is not fantasy. High fantasy can be really complicated, but this is a YA dystopia, so it needs to be super simple, okay? Because everyone, as you know, is stupid until they become 25. Anyone who's under 25 is by definition an idiot. That's how things work. Okay, so enemies of the surface world, there's President Trump and there's Krauss Strauss. And then below deck, you've got Fire Machine, you've got Brad Buttonsworth, and then you've got what's her name? The leader of the cage as a whole, and her name was Cordelia Minister, Madam Minister. Cordelia. I think it's good that her name is Cordelia. Is it a little ridiculous that her name is Cordelia? Yeah. Is it also a little ridiculous that Brad Buttonsworth is named Brad Buttonsworth and Kraus Strauss is named Kraus Strauss? Yeah. But Cordelia Minister, that's my favorite of all of these names. Okay. We stand Cordelia Minister, even though she's objectively horrible. She's the daughter of the previous leader of the Underworld. We should clarify that. Who's the current leader of the Underworld? She's super scary. But she's not the current leader of the Underworld. This is important. Yeah. So cool. Okay, we have to figure out who the current leader of the Underworld is. And they're going to be working in conjunction with Kraus Strauss, I think. Current leader of the Underworld. This is going to be it should be something to do with steel, don't you think? It should be something to do with iron. Because the whole thing is like underground, and we should be thinking about this as like very like steampunk coded, don't you think? So it should be like iron. But it can't be Iron Fist because that's silly. And a terrible television show. If you have the wrong opinions about Iron Fist and you think it's a good show, you're an idiot and you should feel bad about yourself. Okay, so it can't be iron. It should be something other than that. Current leader of the Underworld. Iron. Can't be Iron Maiden because that's Margaret Thatcher. It can't be. Also, it's a woman. Iron. Can't be aluminum. Can't be Iron Man. I don't know if iron's the right mineral. Diamond. No, because that sounds like a fun person. Can't be sword. That could be an interesting one. Sword. Swallower. No. That sounds gay. Gay as in homosexual, not gay as in bad. Gay as in homosexual. Sword swallower sounds like you're just putting a lot of stuff down your mouth, don't you think? Okay. Current leader of the Underworld. We'll come back to the name. Let's just think about who they are. They're a dictator, but their power is slipping. They took control from Cordelia's mother, but with the help of Cordelia. But also now Cordelia, and to a lesser extent that they know of so far at the beginning of the story, what's the guy's name? Fire Machine. Yes, to a lesser extent that they know of at the beginning of the story, Fire Machine are becoming their chief rivals in the Underworld, partially because of Cordelia's comparative name recognition through the televised cage fights. Okay, so they're dictator, but their power is slipping. Okay, took control like 10 years back, also with the help of Kraus Strauss. Right? Kraus Strauss needs to have some degree of Underworld connections, but the question is whether they want to be. Kraus Strauss should be friends with the current leader of the Underworld, or should be friends with Cordelia, or should be friends with the Fire Machine. I don't think Fire Machine is the correct decision of those, because if it's the Fire Machine, then Kraus Strauss is just writ large pro-revolution. And I want Kraus Strauss to have a more complicated machinations to be going on, where he wants a revolution in the upper decks in the surface world, but not below deck. And so therefore I want Kraus Strauss, yes, to be friends with the current leader of the Underworld. Strauss did this behind the back of President Trump the 14th, and has ever since been pretending on the president's behalf to be attempting to get Cordelia to regain control over the Underworld. But to do so covertly, because President Trump the 14th did manage to get a peace negotiation done with the current leader of the Underworld. Let me think. This is interesting. No, I was going to say, are you going to be somewhat related to them? But you're a member of the Cage. You can't be related to anyone in that level of leadership. You have to be someone who's just a random orphan. That has to be the case. Right? That feels right. I don't think you can be anyone important's kid. But also it is very convenient if you are someone important's kid, but if you're going to be their kid, you have to be like their lost kid. So Cordelia would know that you're their kid, but they wouldn't know that you're their kid. That would be interesting, particularly because it would mean that you'd have this like testing where like all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, the leader of the entire Underworld is my kid and like is my father, right? Rather. And then there'd be this like weird question of like, well, Soot is like this committed revolutionary who thinks this whole thing is horrible, but like you are committed to Soot, but are you really committed to the revolution now that you realize that your dad is the one in power? Maybe not, but also you oppose the Cage, which your father is in support of, but also your father was in support of the Cage, not knowing that you were one of the people who lived in the Cage. So it would be this complicated. Yes, I think you should be his father. You are this guy's kid. Your mother was stolen away during the fighting by Cordelia's father, who Cordelia was still working for, quote unquote, working for as a double agent. And so therefore you are going to be their kid, and the rightful heir, at least according to the current leadership of the entire Underworld. Yes. Note that this means this about you. Just you. Pout is not actually your blood sister. She's just a really close friend who you protect motherly and have since a young age, living together in the Cage, parentheses capitalized. Okay, cool. Cool. I like this. You are this guy's kid. Okay, so Cordelia obviously knows this. Madam Minister, we should call her Madam Minister, not Cordelia. Madam Minister obviously knows this, but you don't know this, and neither does the public. But, like, DNA tests exist, and she is 100% for sure correct, and eventually that will be brought to light. This also means that you have a younger half brother who is probably a dick and was raised in leadership of the entire underworld, and that means that you are going to be seen by him as an existential threat to his future rule, obviously. And therefore, if he finds out before your father, that'll start a manhunt to get you dead. There's already a manhunt, somewhat of a manhunt, because you're an escaped child of the cage, along with Soot. And Floof, the doggo, the great doggo, capitalized great doggo, the great doggo. But this will compound a great deal if the heir apparent of the entire underworld realizes what a threat you are, which Madam Minister might let slip to him, depending on the situation. Period. This is quite interesting. I like this a lot. Okay, cool. So that's your relationship to this guy. His name is going to be I can't figure out his name. Grigory Vladimir. Right? Grigory Vladimir? No, Vladimir is too odd, obviously Putin coded. So it can't be Vladimir. It has to be Grigory Romanov. No, because that's obviously Marvel coded. Honestly, fuck Marvel. It's going to be Marvel coded. There's not a goddamn thing that they can do about it, okay? They don't own the word Romanov, okay? That's not their word. Lots of real people are named Romanov. We're naming him Gorbachev instead. They scare me. Disney scares me so much. Grigory Gorbachev. Okay, cool. Grigory Gorbachev. Okay, so what's your name? It has to work with Gorbachev, but also just be like a Soot type name. Your name is you're gonna be a Mary Sue, so your name should be Susan. Parentheses Mary Sue. You don't know this. Know this second part. But your full name is Susan Gorbachev. Gorbachev. Because your father is the dictator of the entire underworld. Bum, bum, bum. Very, very exciting. Okay, cool. Glorious. Let's start figuring out the plot. This is good. We have enough. The plot begins. Okay. You get up top, okay, and you're immediately face to face with Richard, who's just chillin', hanging out in a nice little meadow, reading a book because he's a nerd and because he doesn't really need to work very hard and is soft boy, period. Okay, cool. Soot gets up there just a few seconds after you open the hatch and climb out. Floof immediately jumps out of the backpack he'd been held in this whole time. And despite still having a massive gouge in his left front leg from his most recent fight, bounds towards Richard, who, terrified, starts to try and run away, but is tackled by Floof, who, wagging his tail, starts licking the boy's face. Richard, who we need to establish as the soft boy slash PETA slash Edward, the vampire, needs to immediately take a liking to Floof and to start playing with him back. Is he okay being licked? Or, as a rich man, is he going to think that's gross? I think he should think that's gross. He's therefore going to grab a stick and start playing fetch, but also try and clean himself off on his picnic blanket, because again, he is soft boy coded. Period. Okay, cool. That's our introduction to Richard. Then we begin to see. We begin to talk to each other as Soot, holding a dagger, threatens to kill Richard, as both you and Soot come to the shocking realization that the air is clean and breathable, and that the sunlight and the trees, etc., are remarkable, blah, 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 development of the class differential between Surfaceworld and the cage. Okay, cool. This is good. We're getting there. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Development of the class differential. Cool. Cool. Once that's done, then Richard, who'd never even been below the surface world, shocked by these realizations of its horrors, tells you both that he's so sorry, and explains that his father is among the leadership responsible. Soot makes very little attempt to hide the fact that he wants to kill Richard, kind of, but more so, Richard's father. Period. Richard, realizing that his life is under threat, still throwing the stick throughout this conversation for Floof, for fear that Floof will otherwise eat him. Remember, he has never before realized that the cage is real, and he immediately recognizes both Soot and Floof, though not, it seems, you, even though he pretends to recognize you out of an abundance of respect and fear, and also, ooh woo, you're very attractive. Even though your name is Susan. Period. Cool. So that's Richard. You all end up going with Richard back to his mansion. And in the dead of night, he helps you all to make it up to... he helps... not Floof. He helps both you and Soot to escape to the attic with him, but not Floof, because Floof presumably would make noise. And so therefore, he leaves Floof tied up to a tree. The two of you agree this is the best option. In the woods, period. You're not too concerned some wild animal is going to beat Floof, even if right now he's not at full capacity in a fight, because he's a badass doggo. Period. This seems like the least risky option, considering that he'll almost certainly bark. If you let him inside of the mansion and into its attic. Period. This is a plan that Soot agrees to only very reluctantly. Period. Cool. Meanwhile, downstairs, after this is done, we hear Richard getting screamed at by his father, Senator Kraus Strauss, who's furious that he abandoned his lessons for the day to go off and read in the meadow. Does Richard even care about the future of the Americas? Does he even want to see the rise of House Strauss? Insanity. Yes. This makes you feel bad for Richard as you overhear their screams. But Soot has trouble feeling bad for someone who lives in a mansion and talks about class consciousness in a vaguely plausibly deniable way, such that no one could actually take issue with anything he's saying, even if they're a Republican, though obviously this story has been written both by and for left-coded liberals who are actually secretly just Democrats, secretly just normal Democrats, parentheses, Vosh, comma, TYT, comma, etc., etc., comma. Oh shoot, what are they named? The podcast one that's like the last, not the last podcast. Pod Save America. Pod Save America, end parentheses, / NPR. NPR also. Okay, cool. This is glorious. Okay, cool. Then, the next day, you and Soot stay up in the attic until Richard goes off to school, and Senator Strauss is off to the Senate. You sneak downstairs and basically run after grabbing some food that Richard left for both you and Soot out to the woods to try and locate what's his name? Floof. Try to locate Floof and to protect and to ensure and to give him the medicine that Richard also left for you to help with his leg. Floof is missing. This is a serious problem. Soot immediately draws the conclusion that Richard stole Floof. Richard knew who Floof was. He must know the value of Floof and must have stolen the goodest doggo. You're in tears, both because you are a woman, and because you know that this will destroy Pout's entire psyche. Pout is completely in love with the doggo. Without Floof, who even are you and Pout? You begin to search the woods. You come across in the woods, which, by the way, are remarkable. You've never seen seen trees before, never seen any type of nature, or even plants that haven't already been harvested and ground up into protein bars that you and the other children of the cage eat. Harvested. Okay. So you're kind of like, holy crap, this is such cool. It's the woods. That's crazy. But also, you come across a mountain lion. You're like, oh my God, OMG, it's a fucking mountain lion. Frickin' mountain lion. You don't curse. There is no cursing in this story. Frickin' mountain lion in this story. And parentheses. It's a frickin' mountain lion. Holy crap. Mountain lion. That's crazy. You come across a mountain lion. You're like, oh my God, it's a frickin' mountain lion. You don't curse. The mountain lion attacks you. And Soot, with his stabbing knife from earlier, tries to fight off the mountain lion. He's losing. The mountain lion scratches at Soot, gouging out his eye. And Soot is furious and losing. And there's desperation in the air. And oh my God, people actually think, who are reading, forget for a second just how much plot armor you both have. And they're like, holy crap, there's a possibility that... No, I'm just kidding. Immediately after his eye is gouged, out comes a barking floof who charges at the mountain lion, teeth bared, and he chews up the mountain lion, who squeals loudly in pain. And you and Soot are able to regain yourself. You tear up the bottom of your shirt, making it into a tank top. Because uwu, and give it to Soot to use as a makeshift eye patch to keep in the blood. And Floof, killing the mountain lion, comes bounding up to you both. You give the ointment meant for Floof to Soot instead, who is clearly in more pain, and you patch up Soot, as best you can, half dragging, half carrying him to a small watering hole / stream thingy so that he can catch his breath. Then you see from the distance, holy crap. What is that? It's a city. It's an above ground city with these massive skyscrapers. It's insane. We go on needlessly long about how crazy the concept of an above ground bunker is. You see these massive things that Richard called windows in his home last night. And you're like, wowza. That's like a whole building made of windows. That's crazy. And then you realize, oh no, wowza, that's a whole building made of windows, and you can see the windows, which means that the windows can see you. Dun dun dun, dun dun dun, dun dun dun. Insert scary music. This is good. This is good. This is good. Now, continuing forward. Okay. You give up trying to tie up Floof, because obviously he escaped last time from the tie-up thingy last night, and obviously he probably could use the help if he gets of not being tied up. If he gets into another fight with one of these wild animals again. But you try to go back to the to the Strauss mansion so that you can get more ointment for Floof this time. Meanwhile, it should be noted, the ointment stopped the blood from flowing along with the bottom of your t-shirt wrapped around his face, wrapped around his eye because of woo, around his eye, comma, because woo. But he still can't see. Soot still can't see out of one of his eyes, and he's super embarrassed because he lost his first ever fight, and against a mountain lion. What the schmickle? That's ridiculous. That shouldn't have happened. He's furious and doesn't like to lose fights. Losing fights means death in the cage. If he can't protect you, what is he? Remember, he's not soft boy coded. He's hard boy coded. And if he can't outcompete this Richard boy, parentheses, the rich Strauss one, then that's a problem that must be remedied. He broods sexually and sexily. Period. It's important to brood. It's important to brood. Period. Glorious. Okay, continuing forward. That's what's going on with Soot. Okay. Richard comes back from school. And he's exhausted. He's had a very long day because there's this new problem that the children of the senators are all facing, which is that it's rumored that the firstborn daughter, that the pregnant wife of the former leader of the Underworld, parentheses, what's her name? It's something Clarice, something like that. This is why we have lots of notes. It's important to have notes, ladies and gentlemen. Nope, not Brad. The Zuko-coded Cordelia. Cordelia's father hadn't killed the current leader's pregnant wife, but had rather kept her in captivity, which means that his son or daughter, his firstborn, might still be alive. We, the audience, may or may not know, depending on how it is written, that this son or daughter is you, Susan. Period. As a result of this, President Trump the 14th started a nationwide manhunt for the daughter or son on behalf of his ally below the surface. Yes, this is good. This is very good. This is 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 good. Cool. Be again a nationwide manhunt for the. You don't know this is you, and neither does Richard. But Richard does have a suspicion that the person would be about your age and would be somewhere strongly under the control of the Cordelia family. What's the Control F? Cordelia. Cordelia, so many Cordelia stuff. Where's Cordelia? What's Cordelia's name? Is this the Cordelia section? Go further. Cordelia Gorbachev. But what was Cordelia's? Madam Minister. That's her name. Cool. Madam Minister. The Minister family. Under the control of the Minister family. Somewhere strongly under the control of the Minister family. That means the cage where the Minister family first began to build their power throughout the Underworld, through their public fights to the death, and their mob ties and their betting rings. In all caps, not claps. Glorious. Period. Cool. Okay, so Richard is starting to be suspicious that maybe you are actually this forgotten daughter, this lost daughter. You don't buy it. That seems ridiculous. Why would the Minister family keep you there? Oh. He doesn't specifically think it's you. He thinks it's Soot because he's a sexist. He thinks it's Soot because he's a sexist. And because Soot is the same age as you, and the whole manhunt is predicated on the wrong belief that they're looking for the son of the current leader of the Underworld, rather than his daughter. You don't buy it. That seems ridiculous. Why would the Minister family keep you there? As a member of the cage, that's a threat that they might lose their ace up the sleeve if you ended up losing a fight. Ooh. That seems ridiculous. Why would the Minister keep Soot there as a member of the cage? That's a threat that they might lose their ace up the sleeve if Soot ended up losing a fight. What you don't realize is that you actually haven't been in any fights, save those that are very easily won. Teams against individuals, that kind of thing. And so actually, no, they haven't risked their ace up the sleeve. The audience doesn't realize yet that you're actually the chosen one, parentheses, the daughter of the current dictator of the Underworld. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. We're so good at writing, ladies and gentlemen. We're so good at writing. We're so smart. Okay, cool. Richard tells you both that protecting Soot needs to be the priority. Soot, who believes this kind of thing, and does have a sense that he is very important, and kind of likes being told it, wonders if they should just come forward to President Trump the 14th. You don't like this. Soot used to be a revolutionary. You're starting to realize that even though Soot is hard boy and Richard is soft boy, that Richard actually is the one who believes in things. Whereas Soot believes only in Soot. Period. This is very good. Okay, cool. Soot believes only in Soot. Then, suddenly, there is a hush over the room. Parentheses, you're back in the Strauss mansion. Strauss mansion, hiding in the attic, whispering all of this to each other. It is the maid, Soot, seeing the woman who is clearly confused and terrified, grabs his knife out of his pocket, puts it to her throat, and is like, do we need to kill her? Or can she be trusted? And Richard is like, no. Soft boy aesthetic. Don't kill her. She practically raised me. She's great. And Soot's like, but can she be trusted? And you're like, no, she can't. You must kill her. And so Soot does. Richard is in tears because he is soft boy. And you are like, whoa. Did we just make a mistake? Did I make a mistake? Do I really have this horrible part of me? Does Soot? Does Pout? Does everyone that I know and love, see every interaction as inevitably ending in a fight to the death? And Soot's like, yes, everything is a fight to the death. A fight to the death. The truth is, the world is cold. The world has been nuked. Time and time again. Soft boys like Richard cannot protect you, baby. You need a hard man, such as myself. You think I don't believe in anything? I believe in one thing, baby. I believe in you. Richard is third wheeling, and it's noticeable. You're reeling from the fact that Soot just killed Richard's maid, but it's low-key exciting you. And you find yourself falling for Soot as a result. An argument, this is an addendum, could be made that these kinds of tropes in fantasy and specifically in YA are, bad. But they are the tropes. They are the tropes. And we are not inventive as we write these types of YA novels. And therefore, we need to stick with the tropes. The trope is that when Hard Boy kills people, it makes Mary Sue, parentheses Susan, comma you, fall intensely in love with Hard Boy. It is important. In fairness, inevitably, in the end, you will likely end up with Soft Boy. Not to spoil it, but obviously that's where things are going. That's where things are going because it's the way that it always ends up going in literally every single one of these stories. Every single one of these stories, universally. That's how things work. Period. Glorious. You and Soot and Richard, still in tears, parentheses, just Richard. You're no longer crying. Soot never did cry. He simply smoldered. Are carrying out the carcass of the newly dead maid because you need to protect yourself from yada yada and need to ensure that no one knows of your presence. You bring the carcass along with some ointment to Floof, who is still chowing down on the mountain lion. And after giving more ointment to Floof so that his bite mark in his left front leg, I think it was left front. I don't actually care which leg it is, but we're going to go with left front. And if that's wrong, that's wrong. Okay? Doesn't matter. Okay? It's a YA dystopia. It doesn't have to be well written. That's how YA dystopias work. So, bite mark in his left front leg. Okay? You begin to watch and not participate as Richard alone begins to dig a shallow grave for his maid. Soot, hard boy, refuses to help until, after a while, you offer to take Richard's place as he's clearly exhausted by the work. Sundown is happening, which is still very confusing to you. Fusing to you and Soot both. Because, like, what the fuck? Why would they turn off the sky? Would they turn off the sky? You can turn off the lights of your individual room, fine. But, like, the sky? Keep that light on, my guy. You thought that the surface world was rich and they can't even afford to keep the lights on 24/7. It's a very confusing experience to be in the surface world. You're not sure you like it. You're not sure that you like it. Anyway, you're digging the grave for not very long, but Soot doesn't like it when women do manual labor. That's not a hard boy trait to allow women to do labor, particularly woman, parentheses, that he is responsible for, comma, that is his territory. Comma, he is a dog, vaguely, but not literally. Like, what's his name? I'm just kidding. I remember his name. I remember his name, comma, Jacob. I've read and watched all of the Twilight because I'm ridiculous. And in my defense, have two sisters. End parentheses. Okay. Fantastic. Particularly woman. So you and Richard are now watching as Soot digs the grave for the woman that Soot killed on your behalf. Or at the very least, with your permission. But you feel that you're responsible for this woman's death. You don't necessarily feel that killing her was the right decision. Richard clearly hates Soot. Meanwhile, Floof, he's having a great time. He's like no longer injured as bad. now that he's gotten the ointment, he's never in his life been able to run around off leash except when inside of the cage itself, as in a fight, or preparing for a fight / practice. So like this whole being able to do the zoomies, he's having a great time. Surfaceworld is doggo approved. For real. Period. Cool. Onward and forward. Then you're all, we need to get back before your father comes home. And Richard shakes his head. You don't understand. I can't go back. She's dead, sure. She won't call the police. She won't tell the Trump administration / regime. We're going to call it the regime. The regime, because that sounds more intimidating. But they're literally the exact same word, the exact same term. So that's a little ridiculous. Anyway. But she's dead. And my father will have questions. Questions I can't answer. We can never go back. You're like, whoa. Soft boy? Getting hella hard. LOL. Wowza. Okay. You're falling for Richard. Soot finally finishes with the grave. And Richard stands up and he says a few words about how important this woman was. And it's very obvious that he's mad at Soot because what the fuck, man? What the frick? I'm sorry. What the frick, man? Parentheses, no cursing. Why did you kill my maid? She did nothing wrong. You're not a revolutionary. You're a cold-hearted killer, etc., etc. But he pretends that this is all. He pretends that this is all just him mourning and him giving a prayer. And then they finish and they bury and they fill in the grave over her. And they begin their long march into hiding. Where do they go now? Okay, that's the real question. Where do they go? Okay. So they have two basic options: Surfaceworld and Underworld. Surface World, obviously, this is hard because, this is a bad idea because they think that Soot's father is the leader of the Underworld, when in truth it's you. It's you. And therefore, yins, Pittsburghese, for you, plural. It's also gender neutral. Like y'all, but not like you guys. It's almost like Yankees are sexist. Anyway, so this is a bad idea because yins think that Soot's father is the leader of the Underworld, when in truth it's you, and therefore you're trying to get to the place where they the capital of the Underworld to try and prove that Soot is, in fact, the long-lost son, and therefore to protect them. Okay. Therefore, you, the three of you can get protection. The three of you, mostly Soot, though actually mostly you, can get protection. The Underworld. You want to go and save Pout because the cage is not the cafe. The cage is terrible. And it's only a matter of time until she's forced into a fight, one she may very well lose, and that's not good at all. So Richard ultimately just wants to keep you safe because he's in love now. Love now, having known you for a grand total of ballpark 18 hours at this point. And so he's not thrilled to be going anywhere at all. He'd be perfectly happy pinning this whole situation on Soot, except somehow getting you onto his staff such that you're able to live with him, and presumably the two of you live happily ever after, albeit his dad sucks, and presumably the two of you can't actually get married. Or anything because you're not classy. You're from the cage. Parentheses, he doesn't realize that you're actually the daughter of the leader of the Underworld. Okay, so that's your situation. But Richard also thinks that Soot is the son of the leader of the Underworld, which would suggest that killing him or otherwise failing to protect him would doom his house. He also has some degree of ambitions of his own. And so he wants to make friends to some degree. Insert gay, unaddressed sexual tension. Does it have to be unaddressed? Can we address the sexual tension, the gay sexual tension between them? I don't know if we can. The reasons, okay. Pros and cons of addressing the growing sexual tension between Richard and Soot. Pros. Yummy, etc. We also live in 2023. The gay agenda, those are both capitalized, capitalized agenda, has won. And therefore, we must queerify our fiction. It is necessary. Those are the pros. Cons. It takes away from the intensity of the competition over you, Susan, the main character, the self-insert. This is not ideal. Therefore, the gays can go frick themselves, parentheses, no cursing. We will be doing heterosexualism in this story, period. Okay, cool. So we are not going to address the sexual tension, but there is the unaddressed sexual tension. Has ambitions of his own. Okay, so Richard has a degree of ambitions of his own, and so he wants to make friends to some degree with Soot, who he thinks is the heir apparent, assuming that he's able to get safely back to the capital of of the Underworld. That would be very good. Would put him back in the good graces of his father, Senator Kraus Strauss, who, remember, Richard has intense daddy issues over, period. Good. This is good. Okay, so that's Richard's goal set. Your goal set is that you want to go save Pout because the cage is terrible. Oh, you also want to keep the two of them with you / by your side because you really like the attention and because they're both super sexy and also because woo, and also because they, sexuality aside, are both seemingly pretty competent, albeit in different ways. In that Soot can fight good, and that Richard can both think good and can politics good. Period. This is good. 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 We're making progress. We're making progress. We're making progress. Okay, cool. Good. Therefore, with all that said, therefore, you must go to the Underworld. Period. And specifically, you demand, and Soot reluctantly agrees, you must get Pout out of the cage. Okay. This is going to be extremely difficult. Because, like, what the fuck? What the frick? Parentheses, no cursing. That's literally the cage, capitalized, as always. You don't just get someone out of the cage. That's a one-way ticket. And yet, the two of you escaped. How did you escape? You escaped because you were able, you, parentheses, Susan, remember, you are Susan, okay? This whole thing is from an from a personal perspective, right? The whole thing is like in first person. That's the word that I'm looking for. The whole thing is written in first person, okay? So every time I say you, I mean you. I mean you, comma, Susan, okay? You are Susan. You are Susan. Your name is Susan. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. You are Susan. How does it feel to be Susan? Okay, cool. You escaped because you, Susan, were able to flirt with the guards, and then Soot stabbed them with his pointy thing. And they got dead. And then you managed to grab Floof right before they were themselves going to carry Floof all the way up to the surface. You didn't realize this part, but to become a, parentheses, breeding pet slash guard dog for President Trump the 14th. May his name live in infamy. Yes. So that's how you escaped. So it was kind of, it was low-key chance. Okay. So you're going to try to get back in to the cage. You're going back to the cage. You're going back to the cage. Okay. How does the cage work? This is really interesting. We need to create, with a paper towel, a map of the cage. Okay. First of all, we've got a ladder. I don't know if you can see this from this angle, but I'm going to go like this, so maybe you can see it. If I go, give me a second. If I do this, I put you over here, and then I go like this. You can kind of see that. Okay. So I apologize that you're going to see this upside down, but I'm writing it right side up for me because I am the main character, okay? Although admittedly, you are Susan. So actually, you're the main character, but I'm the writer. And so therefore, as the narrator / writer, I'm going to write this for me, and then I'm going to turn it around so you can see it better. But first, I'm going to make it. Okay, cool. So we've got this massive shaft where we have the ladder. You are here in the surface world. Surface world. Okay, so that's where you are. You're up in the schmoopity boppity right there. Okay, that's where you are. Then down here, there's a bunch of like entryways to a bunch of different bunker levels up and down the shaft, right? Up and down the shaft, there's a bunch of different bunker levels that go to different things, right? You're trying to go all the way down to the cage. The cage is super far down. Froosh, froosh, way down there. Those little dots there, those are little like the rungs of the ladder, okay? This is not to scale. I want to clarify. There's 148 floors, I think it was. I don't really remember exactly, but I think it was 148 floors. You're not seeing this to scale, okay? And I'm sorry, but I refuse to change it. Okay, cool. Down here is the cage. There are more floors even below the cage, just to clarify. Even more, way below it. Okay, but there's the cage down there. And over here, you have to go up a bunch of floors after you get to the cage, over a long, arduous journey. I'm just going to write arduous. Journey. Okay, arduous journey. And then once you do the arduous journey, then you come over here to the Underworld Then you get to the Underworld Palace after the arduous journey. Okay, so first you need to go down, okay, further than the floor that gets you to the arduous journey over to the Underworld Palace over here. That's the first thing that you got to do, okay? But you have to go past that all the way down to the cage in order to protect Pout, right? Remember, okay, you're the only one who gives a shit about Pout, okay? Richard doesn't really give a shit about Pout, okay? Soot doesn't really give a shit about Pout. You are the only one in the entire world who cares about Pout, but you care about Pout so much, okay? You love Pout. You stand Pout. We must protect Pout. It is necessary. That is the map, okay? That's the map, okay? You're up here in the surface world. You're going past where you need to get to so that you can begin the arduous journey on the floor. Because remember, this is the entire country. This is thousands of miles from the correct floor over arduous journey to the Underworld Palace. You're directly above right now the cage. You're up here, up in the schmoopity boppity over here. You're directly above the cage, right? But you're very far away from the Underworld Palace, okay? That's where we're at, okay? And it's very hard to go down there, and it's exhausting, way more hard to go back up. Because there are elevators, but you can't access the elevators. Presumably, we think you can't access the elevators. Maybe you can access the elevators. We don't know. We're writing the story. This is how storytelling works, okay? We're figuring out, okay, if you're going to be able to use an elevator to get back up. But for now, okay, you're going to have to take the ladder. And Pout, this is important. Pout, okay, so issues in relation to saving Pout. Parentheses. The side quest that only you care about, but the bros / the love interests. Let's get rid of the bros. The love interests They're not bros, okay? That's silly. They're not bros. They're love interests. That's a different thing. It's a different thing. They're not the same, okay? Yes. The issues in relationship to saving Pout, the side quests that only you care about, but the love interests are only doing because they love you, are only doing because they love you and because you're actually, yeah, they just love you. Yeah. Issues in relationship to saving Pout. You. Ooh! This is just a note. Soot isn't going to go with you to protect Pout, which means you're going to get separated. And it's going to be hella dramatic. Oh, neither of them are going to help you. And at first, Richard is going to say that, listen, he loves you, but he can't protect Pout either. Because the truth is, as much as he loves you, the system must crumble. And he needs to protect Soot so that the Trump regime, Trump the 14th, we have to write that down so we don't get canceled by YouTube. Trump the 14th regime, okay? Otherwise, YouTube would cancel me. If we just wrote the Trump regime, we didn't write the Trump the 14th regime, okay? We would get canceled by YouTube, and we cannot get canceled by YouTube. It is necessary that we do not be canceled by YouTube, okay? So that the Trump the 14th regime, needs to protect Soot so that the Trump of the 14th regime doesn't destroy the entirety of the Underworld. Note, Soot doesn't realize that his father is the one with a truly sinister plot. Against the Underworld. And that, in truth, this is a plot that your father Richard doesn't understand. Richard doesn't understand that his father is the one with a truly sinister plot against the Underworld, and that, in truth, this is a plot that your father, not Soot's father, but your father, is in full agreement over. This is truly going to be very good. Very, very, very good. Okay, cool. So that's your situation. Okay, that's what's going on. Okay, so far. Okay, so Soot isn't going to go with you, and Richard eventually won't go with you either, and you'll be heartbroken. But you'll carry on alone to save your sister, not blood sister, but sister of the heart, comma, Pout. Okay? You're gonna protect Pout. Okay? You really care about Pout. These fucking men. Okay? Frickin' men. I'm sorry. These frickin', parentheses, no cursing, men have betrayed you by focusing on getting to the Underworld Palace through the arduous journey down the stairs together. You're going to get to this point, and you're going to have this like, holy crap-a-mole, we should keep going, and then they're just going to be like, no, we cannot afford to. You need to abandon Pout. You need to be committed to the revolution. You need to be blah, 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 blah. All the men stuff. But you'll be like, I'm a girly, okay? I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to do the thing. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do the thing, okay? You're a girly. You're going to do the thing, exclamation point. Cool. Okay, so these are the first issues in relationship to saving the pout. Then we get to actually, you go down the arduous ladder, okay? And now you need to get to pout. Okay, so there's a couple of issues. First issue, it's always been hard to escape the cage, obviously. It's got extra hard because, oh yeah, you and Soot and Floof just escaped. That was literally just a couple days ago. They're basically on lockdown, even more than normal. Okay? So that's the second problem. I can spell normal. Okay? I know how to spell the word normal. Okay? I know. Okay, cool. It got extra hard. Ooh, that was a voice crack. It got extra hard because, oh yeah, you and Soot and Floof just escaped. That was literally a couple days ago. They're basically on lockdown, even more than normal. Cool. So that's one of the issues. It's very hard to escape the cage, obviously. Pout is a lot physically weaker than you, 19 years old, and Soot, 20 years old, and a man. She is a 14-year-old girly, period. Just girl. We don't need to go girly. Not girly. She's not engaging in girly behavior yet. She's simply a child, period. Cool. Okay, so that's the second problem. The third problem, problem F. I'm sorry, not third problem. There's lots of other problems with the Soot and the Richard and the okay. Problem F. Okay, we're on problem F. Okay? Problem F is that, that's an interesting question. Yeah, the guys brought Floof. Yeah, that seems right. The guys brought Floof, right? The guys bring Floof with them, with your permission, because you can't carry him. You aren't strong enough to carry him even just down, let alone back up on your own when you're already trying to protect Pout, period. This is going to be very good. I have to blow my nose. That was not a successful blow, but that's okay. Fortunately, obviously you won't be part. This is all from your perspective, so you won't be able to see this part. But fortunately, there will be blowing going on between Soot and Richard. But that's going to be coded. Okay, it's not going to be something that we're going to actually be able to see as part of the story, but it's going to be coded. But remember, it's only going to be coded. It's going to be an undercurrent of homoeroticism. Okay, but it's not going to be something that's actually explicitly built into the actual story itself. Because again, okay, we need to queer bait. It is necessary. Note. We should put that down. Note. While they are off alone together, this whole story is written first person from Susan's perspective. There will be implied queer baiting activities between Soot and Richard, but we won't address them. They will simply be implied. Homosexualism, exclamation point. Cool. Continuing onward and forward. Okay, Pout is a lot physically weaker than you, 19 years old, and Soot, 20 years old. She's a 14-year-old girl. Not a girly. She's not engaging in girly behavior yet. She's simply a child. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's an issue. Another issue is that Pout is all like, wow, we should save everyone. Why are we just escaping on our own? Wow. This is stupid. Pout is stupid. She should stop being stupid. Okay? It's literally a cage. It's literally slavery. It's literally a gladiatorial arena and training system around it. It's not good. It's not good. Okay. So that's the situation. You're going to need help. You're going to need... Okay. You, therefore, need help. There's 3 possible helpers. A. What's her name? The, not Clarice. It starts with a C. Hold up. These are the Surface World enemies. You're not in Surface World enemies we're talking about. This is why we write things down, ladies and gentlemen, because I remember people's names not very well. Yes, Madam Minister. Cordelia Minister. Glorious. Scrolling back down to the bottom. Cordelia Minister. Cordelia Minister. She literally is responsible for this whole thing. You know, you don't realize that you're the daughter of the dictator of the Underworld. But you do know correctly that she's the one who kidnapped the child of the dictator. She cannot be trusted because she is evil. Second option is like Brad, whatever his name is. I don't care. Final option is Fire Machine. This is the correct choice. Okay. So question is, what's in it for Fire Machine? What's in it for Fire Machine to help you get Pout out of the the cage and off to the Underworld Palace after an arduous journey? The Underworld Palace, comma, after an arduous journey. Did I misspell arduous? Oh, I did misspell arduous. I misspelled it on the thingamaboober too. Arduous. Fascinating. I didn't know that. This is the wrong Sharpie. Look how fat this Sharpie is. I'm going to write with it anyway. Arduous journey. I couldn't find the correct Sharpie, so we're going to use the wrong Sharpie, and that's fine. I don't even care. It's fine. Okay? It's fine. Anyway. Okay. What's in it for Fire Machine to help you get Pout out of the cage and off to the Underworld Palace after an arduous journey? Okay. It's in his interest because you somehow pay him. Okay. Sexual favors.
No. Wrong type of payment. This is YA dystopia. You can only have 2 love interests. Those 2 relationships can be as toxic as we want. That's fine. But there can't be a 3rd relationship. That would be ridiculous. Period. Okay, so not sexual favors. Another thing you could do is offer straight up money. No, you don't have any money. You don't have any money. You grew up in the cage. 3rd, you could offer him Soot. You could offer to help him locate Soot, who he believes to be the son of the dictator, even though secretly it's you who's the daughter of the dictator of the Underworld. Yes, this is the right answer. This is the right answer. You will be his guide up to find Soot, who has betrayed you by focusing on himself and his own power, etc., etc., by going homosexually coded with Richard to the palace of the Underworld. This is glorious, 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 glorious jazz hands. Glorious, 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 glorious jazz hands. Okay, cool. So this is the right answer. Okay, so that's how you're going to get his support. Once you've managed to get his support, how are you going to get it? Okay, first we have to figure out that. Okay, cool. So let's figure out the plotting here. This is good. This is going to work. This is going to work. I believe in this. Okay. You get to the cage. They're in the middle of practice. You can overhear it. Overhear them from the from where you're hiding alone, secretly, above the cage practice rooms themselves, where both Fire Machine and the other leaders of the cage have their offices and their private quarters. Fire Machine is up there in his own quarters. And he sneaks up behind you as you press your ear to the floor to try and hear what's going on in the room you've discovered Pout is being held in. There's this massive fight going on below you. And actually, you're watching it, not just listening. Not just listening through a grate in the ground. Note, this grate implies that Fire Machine hears the fighting beneath him all the time. His is, though better as a living quarters than the ones who haven't earned their freedom, clearly worse than anyone else of the leadership team of the cage. Capitalized. This is good. This is good. We're making progress, ladies and gentlemen. We're making progress. Okay? Okay. So that's Fire Machine. Fire Machine hears the fighting beneath him all the time. Fire Machine puts a dagger to your throat. And a hand over your mouth. He demands that you tell him everything. You explain the entire plot to him up until this point. He nods his head. He frames it as his own idea. Actually, no. It just straight up is his own idea that you will bring him to Soot because you refuse to tell him what floor they got off on. Note, once the floor is discovered, that's actually all the information that Richard shared with you. He didn't tell you what happened, what they did, where they went next. You actually aren't helpful past that point. But Fire Machine doesn't know that. Doesn't need to know that, period. This is good. 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 Okay, cool. My lips are becoming chapped. Do I have chapstick somewhere? I don't think I do. That's terrible. That's horrible. I think we need to cut this here so that I can get chapstick and so we can start a part 2. Bye.